Shabbat Shalom. Please be seated. Yahweh's peace be with everyone. Okay, I have a quick message before I get into this from Yahweh here. Quick message. This is a special message from Yahweh. It wasn't God who created earth. From Yahweh, see? You need to pick up that copy of the New Prophetic Word on the table. That's the descending of the gods issue. Can I have the first title slide? We're gonna get into part 2 of Upon This Rock I Will Build My Church. Of course, we're not talking about the house of Yahweh. It's not a church, but we're going to show the foundation of this other this other tree, the evil tree of Cain. Now let's go to the first slide, because we want to look at this word Jupiter, because there's some spellings that we need to get in our mind. Jupiter, early forms of the name were Diovis Pater, or Potter, and Diaspiter, names deriving from ancient Indo-European roots meaning sky and father. Remember that word Pater last week where we showed Pope, Peter, Potter, all the same word. Jupiter also was spelled I-U-P-P-I-T-E-R before the J came in, okay? So there's another form of the spelling. Also called Dieu Pater, meaning Zeus, Deus meaning Zeus, and Pater, or Patar, father. Okay, now, of course, you can put in sky god Zeus there in the Gematria, and you'll see that number of Jupiter, 1356. Don't forget that number. We went over this last time, and we showed over and over and over how that number comes up in everything pertaining to the Catholic Church. Let's find out who this first pope was. Okay, we're going to prove it today, who the first pope was. It's been under our nose the whole time. Can I have my first slide? Or the next slide? Okay, so this is from chapter 20 of the 16th book. The title is Cain Was the First Pope. The agent that influenced him was Satan. The agency that was behind him was the Catholic Church, the house of the gods. And this sermon was from 612:16, which is the palindrome pointing at 612, or, you know, the 666, the mark of the beast. In verse 20, Pastor says, you've got to understand all of this to understand what I just told you I was going to show you, and that is Cain was the first pope. That's the way all the world has gone, the way of Cain. So let's look in the Gematria of Cain was the first pope, gone in the way of Cain. So the first number, 421, means curse, and that's what the way of Cain brings. It brings curses. The second number is 2526, and it means Ham. Now, Ham was the son of Noah, but remember, Cush, who begot rebellion, or fathered Nimrod, fathered rebellion, Ham was his father, okay? And the land of Ham was what land? Egypt, okay? Egypt was the land of Ham. And it's from 2552, meaning to inflame self, to be hot. By the way, also Ham is a name for the Egyptians, or Hamites, as they were called. And 3291 is the third number, and it means Jacob, from 6117, deals craftily, supplant, circumvent, or to go around. Okay, let's show the where it showed that curse. Let's go to the next slide. When you put in Ham, Jacob, the curse, here's what you get. 182 is a cause. Remember, a curse doesn't come without a cause, right? I believe that's Proverbs 25:1. It says a cause, or on account of, a firebrand. Now, a firebrand is to stir the fire. It's a radical, a troublemaker, an agitator, or a rabble-rouser. That's what that word firebrand means. The second number, 1092, means to be troubled, frightened, to terrify. From 926, to disturb, terrify, dismay, tremble, agitate, hasten anxiously, thrust out, trouble, and vex. This is all showing what comes from this Nimrod system that Cain was the first pope over. And 1054 is the third number, and that's the Gematria of Jupiter, 1054. Jupiter is the divider, the one that divides mankind, that tries to separate us from Yahweh. She's a troublemaker. She's an agitator, a rabble-rouser that likes to get everyone at each other. As you can see, the world is in that condition today. So let's go to the next slide. When you put in all those, these definitions I just gave you, just the way I put them, here's what you get. It's 5178 from 5176, Nakash from 5175, a serpent, a snake, from 5172 to practice divination. Remember the divining serpent. The divining serpent, that's what the word Vatican means. Look it up on Google. Anybody that's listening right now, just type in Vatican and you'll find out it means divining serpent. And it means divination, enchantments, interprets omens, learn by experience. You know, instead of learning from reading the book of Yahweh and avoiding these curses, they have to learn by experience. Whisper a magic spell, to prognosticate, to hiss and divine. The second number, 3106, it's the word Yubal. It's the son of Lamech. And remember in Genesis 10, Lamech ties into that line there of with Cain and Ham and all of them. Son of Lamech, 666. Yubal was the son of Lamech. Okay, and then the third number, 2937, means to wander, one who deviates from the right way, to lead astray, seduce, misled, a wandering vagrant. Remember what Cain was? Remember it said that he would be a wandering, ever searching for peace? Apostasy, superstition, and idolatry. Now you take those numbers and you add them up and you'll get 11, 22, 1. We'll just use those four, 11, 22. And it means sons, Egyptians, beasts, tumultuous, scoundrels. By the way, scoundrels is 666 in Gematria. Revelers, wicked, foreigners, troops, warriors, whelps. Remember Yada the lion's whelp. From 1129 to begin to build, builders, and set up. Talking about these masons, okay, that were from the beginning. Remember, Satan was the first mason. Today's date is very interesting. Can I have my next slide? Today's date is Samuel 3, 1130, 2019. And it comes up to 4198 because the 4198 are following the way of Cain. Okay, who I'm going to prove today was the first pope. Okay? I guess what I've showed you already isn't enough, so I'm going to show you some more. Can I have my next slide? So chapter 20 again, this is verse 32, the name Egypt. Now catch this, watch closely. The name Egypt, pastor says, is an English rendering of the Greek name Aegyptos, which in turn is a translation of the Egyptian Huat Patah, meaning house of Ptah. Sound familiar? Peter? Which was probably one of the first gods. Not all the gods, but he was listed among the so-called creation gods by the Egyptians, house of Ptah. So when you put in the Egyptian Huat Patah, you get 1356, which is from Jupiter. Okay, now just keep that word in your mind there, Patah. Can I have my next slide? So put in the first Patah of the tree of righteousness and evil, and you get 2535, and look whose name comes up. Cain. Cain. Now, could that be a coincidence? I don't think so. Now, you see Ptah here, this god, he's called the creator god. He created all the gods. He's the one that Egypt is named after, okay? And he's got in his hand a scepter, and he's got a couple ankhs. They call them those Egyptian ankhs. We'll just think of them as the keys of Peter, because he's the interpreter. He's the one that interprets the mysteries of ancient Egypt, which, by the way, only the house of Yahweh can show you this, okay? No one else will be able to explain this, okay? Only the house of Yahweh reveals secrets in these last days. So he's the first pope, or Ptah, Peter, okay, father of this tree of righteousness and evil, Cain. When you put in two ankhs, you get 666. Those are what he has in his hand. A symbol of two keys, 1356, showing fell from Jupiter or came from Jupiter. Can I have my next slide? So pastor goes on to say in verse 67 of this same sermon, This is actually out of the 17th book, chapter 24, verse 67. Pastor says, the well-known historian Will Durant concurs that Ra, Amun, Ptah were combined as three embodiments or aspects of one supreme but three total deities. Remember the Trinity? Ra, Uman, and Ptah. This is the junk that they push away for the Holy Scriptures. Okay, I'm going to show you here in a minute. It's an old wives' tale, okay? It's a silly old wives' tale. But this is what they believe. This is what they're pushing. Now this Amun, if you remember, Amun-Ra is another name for Zeus or Jupiter, all the way back in Egypt. Remember, they were worshiping Jupiter all the way back in Egypt. They called him Amun-Ra. As you can see here in Wikipedia, he was known as Zeus Amun. Amun-Ra became known as Zeus Aman, and he came to be identified with Zeus in Greece, and then as Jupiter in Rome, okay? So when you put in Zeus Aman Jupiter, you get 1356 again, which is fell from Jupiter, or came from Jupiter. Can we, now I'm going to play a video for you. I want you to watch very closely because there's some text in there and some Gematria in there. But I want to show you, remember what I told you last week about the Feast of St. Peter being on February 22nd on the worldly calendar? Well, let's see something else that occurs on February 22nd every year. And let's tie it in to the very beginning. Go ahead and play the video.
The great temple of Abu Simbel was designed to make dramatic use of sunlight, a supreme example of the astronomical knowledge of the ancient Egyptians and of the skill of their architects. Twice a year, in February and October, the sun's rays, shining through the narrow entranceway of the temple, through the giant pillared hall, 60 feet deep, penetrate to the inner sanctuary, which at other times is in darkness. The images of three gods, Amun, Raharikti, 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 and the pharaoh himself, are illuminated. Only the fourth deity, Ptah, 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 the god of the underworld, remains in the shadows.
Any questions who Peter is? Or the Pope, the Father from the beginning? If there's still questions, I got an answer for you. Can I have my next slide? In this Gematria here of Cain knew his wife and she conceived and bore Enoch, and he built the city and called the name of the city after the name of his son, which is Enoch. This is Genesis chapter, I believe, chapter 4. Let's just look at a couple of these. Look at 1126. In the Greek, it means silly wives' tales. Silly wives' tales. Remember, Pastor said they gave up all this wisdom for these foolishness of this Ptah. Okay. Now look at the next number, 6756 in Hebrew. It means an image, an image like a likeness, a resemblance, a vain show, a representative, a figure, especially a heathen god idol, a phantom, now get this, to shade shadow. Remember the shadow? When the shadow comes, when the sun shines into that temple, the shadow, it only hits the three gods, but it shadows Peter because they don't want you to know what I'm telling you right now. Peter, Ptah, Cain, this first pope, okay, is who this is representing, this pope, this father from the beginning. They're shadowing it, but it's also, that word shadow means it's an image or a representation of something. And remember, Ptah is a representation of the Pope, Peter, okay? And that third number, 7017, notice, Cainite from 7014 means Cain. Cain from 7013, a spear, a lance. Okay? Keep that in mind, a spear and lance. Let's go to the next. You can also put in a Cainite and Cain and get 666, of course. Look in your book of Yahweh. I'm not making this up. this is right under your nose, Genesis 2:9. The very first mention of this evil tree in Genesis 2:9. It says, and the tree of the knowledge of righteousness and evil was in the midst also. Okay, now there's a side note there. Side note C. It says a mixture of righteousness and evil. This is Babylon, which means confusion, a mix, gate of God. It's words 894 and 1101, and it gives the meanings, and it gives you other references there. Now, I put that in exactly the way it is in your book of Yahweh, did not add anything to it or subtract anything to it. And let's see what these numbers reveal about this tree of knowledge of righteousness and evil. The first number is 2535, and it means heat, the sun, hot, from 2552, inflame self, be hot. It's from 2526. Remember that word Ham, the land of Ham. By the way, being hot is talking about being hot for the gods. They were hot for these gods, okay? That's what it's talking about. Now, the second number, 2535 in the Greek, notice, Cain. Cain, a son of Adam. Doesn't that show you who this was? That pastor told us from the very beginning, Cain was the first pope. Cain was the one that was teaching from this evil tree. Now I'm going to prove to you here in the numbers, he pulled his mother out. Watch this. Cain, 2535. And then the third number, or the 1521, the second number, 1521, means Gihon. If you remember in Genesis 2, Gihon is one of the rivers of Eden, which encompasses the whole land of Cush. Cush, the one that begot rebellion. Okay, remember? And Cain was the one in the line that inspired Ham and Cush in them. Remember, Cain was the first pope, but then it continued on with Ham and Cush and that group. Okay, after the flood. Now notice, let's see, 1356. I don't know where I'm getting that. Okay, 1521. 1521 in the Greek means to bring in, lead into, to introduce. Talking about lead into sin or introduce to sin. Well, who did he introduce to sin? Notice the third number, 1668. From 2088, first woman. First woman. Oh, he led the first woman? Who was the first woman? Who did he lead into sin? Notice, first woman follows one out to another. In other words, she left the house of Yahweh and went to serve the gods. And then 1668 in the Greek means to drag, to draw, to pull, persuade, dragged, drew, drag off. Why do you think they call him the dragon? Okay, because he drugged the woman away from the teachings of the house of Yahweh. So who is inspiring Cain? Can we look on the next slide? Remember, Pastor said the agent that influenced him was Satan. In verse 29, Pastor said Cain was the mouthpiece, but there was an inspiration coming to Cain to teach it. Notice the Catholic agency that led Cain, 1054, which is the number of Jupiter. That's who is inspiring Cain. Okay? I'm going to skip this, skip 2 slides, go up to the begetter. Skip a couple slides and go up to the begetter. It has Ptah there with P. There you go. Now, look at the arrows. You see that? That's a depiction of Peter and the keys of Peter. And see that cross there? Isn't that the same thing that Ptah has had in his hand? Isn't that amazing, right? What a coincidence. That's a Catholic picture right there I'm showing you. I didn't make that up. Okay? Now notice, when you put in these synonyms for Ptah and father, it means a begetter, patriarch, pater familias, adoptive father, daddy, pop, papa, pater. You get the number 666. But you also get the number 3248, and it means foundation. From 3246, beginning. Remember, from the beginning. This was from the beginning in ancient Egypt. From 3245, foundation. Remember what rock they're built upon? Yahweh said their rock is not as our rock. It's not the same rock. It's the rock of Peter, Ptah. took counsel, instruct. Yes, they were instructed by this God. Now, I'm going to leave you with a little teaser here. Can I have my next slide? Okay. Here's the Patria Pater, the father of our country. His name is George Washington. This is an actual picture, okay, that I'm going to show you about next time. He's called the Patria Pater, the father of our country. Okay? All right? And there's a reason, because you're going to find out about the Capitol on Capitol Hill, the Temple of Jupiter, which mirrors Capitoline Hill in Rome, which it was fashioned after. If you'll notice over Washington's head, you see the god Zeus. You see Jupiter there? That's Zeus, Jupiter. I'm going to show this. I'm going to prove it. It's in their own writings. He is the Jupiter of this country. But I want you to see something here on these numbers. Remember, the 2274 is talking about this company, this association, which I'm going to show you next time. They're called a cabal. Yahweh calls them a cabal in the Hebrew. Okay? And notice the number 1961. That's when Pastor moved to Cross Plains. Cross Plains. What does that mean? What could this mean? And what does 1961 have to do with George Washington and the Babylonish land that the house of Yahweh was established in? Well, you'll just have to wait and find out. But for now, remember who the first pope was. Yeah, Pastor was right again, right? Man, imagine that. Praise Yahweh for the greatest teacher in the world, the greatest students in the world, and if they all please stand. It's my great honor and privilege to introduce to you